In the last 500 years, exactly 3 global superpowers have experienced collapse. All 3 began in similar ways. All 3 made similar mistakes, and all 3 believed they were exceptional, until they stood at the edge of collapse. In 2026, the United States has completed 5 of these 7 patterns. I am not saying this as a conspiracy theory. I am telling you this as someone who knows history well. In the 1500s, Spain was the richest and most powerful empire in the world. Half of the world's gold and silver reserves belonged to them. Their armies controlled continents. Their currency was valid across the world. 80 years later, they stood on the brink of bankruptcy, and they never truly recovered. In 1914, Britain ruled the largest empire humanity had ever seen. The pound sterling was the global reserve currency. 40 years later, the empire had disappeared into history. Its currency had eroded, and it had become America's junior partner. In 1991, the Soviet Union was a magnificent superpower. Nuclear weapons, global influence, satellites covering the entire space above the Earth. It disappeared in 900 days. Not because of war. It collapsed inward. 3 empires, 3 stories, all ending the same way: collapse. And now we come to the part that will truly disturb all of us: the United States. The same footprints are being followed, step by step, stage by stage, as if moving forward through the same script that led to disaster every time. This is the story of how empires die, why they always believe they are different from the others, and why history tells us that the next painful reckoning is approaching. And believe me, it is happening much faster than you want to admit. Before we confront it, you need to understand what imperial collapse actually looks like, what it means when a superpower dies. Imperial collapse does not begin with a siege or military defeat. It begins with economic exhaustion. The empire expands beyond its ability to govern itself. Military bases in many countries, wars on multiple fronts, promises it cannot fulfill, billions in debt it cannot repay. At first, not much noise is heard. The money still works. The army still wins wars. The government still distributes hope. But beneath the surface, cracks have already begun to form. Then it begins to accelerate. Allies start looking for alternatives. Enemies approach the borders. Trade partners search for other options. The reserve currency erodes, and everything that once made you super powerful suddenly turns into your weakness. Your currency, once demanded by the entire world, suddenly begins to lose value because no one is forced to hold it. Your army, positioned across the globe, becomes unable to cope with command challenges. Promises guaranteed by power turn into empty words. This is not a theory. This is history. This is lived reality. This is what happened to Spain. This is what happened to Britain. This is what happened to the Soviet Union. And now I will show you how this is happening to the United States, step by step. Let's begin with Spain, the 1500s, when Columbus discovered America in 1492. Spain became the world's first true global power. They conquered the Aztecs and the Inca. They seized the richest gold and silver mines. By 1550, Spanish ships were carrying 200 tons of silver per year. By 1600, that number had doubled to 400 tons of silver. Spain controlled Europe's money supply. The Spanish real was the global reserve currency. Everyone demanded Spanish silver. And this is exactly where the story begins, with a country that controls the world's money and believes that this makes it untouchable. Stage 1. Military overextension. Spain was fighting everywhere at the same time. The Ottoman Empire in the Mediterranean, France and Italy in Europe, Protestant rebels in the Netherlands, the English Navy, and intense conflicts in the Philippines and the Americas. By 1580, Spain had military commitments on 4 continents. The cost began to form a heavy burden. Half of Spain's revenue was going to the military. King Philip II was one of the richest rulers in history, and he spent nearly all of that wealth on the empire's military power, and it was not enough. Stage 2. Currency devaluation. Spain could no longer repay its debts through its economic tax system. So what did they do? They did exactly what every collapsing empire has done. They debased their currency. They began mixing copper into silver coins. What had once been pure silver gradually became 50% copper, then 75%. Eventually, there was almost no silver left in Spanish silver coins. Merchants stopped accepting the currency as valuable. Inflation exploded severely. Stage 3. Debt trap. In order to stop this economic deterioration, Spain kept borrowing continuously. From Italian bankers, from German bankers, from nearly anyone willing to lend. Only 20 years after Philip ascended the throne, in 1557, Spain declared bankruptcy. They restructured their debts, but continued borrowing. In 1560, bankruptcy again. In 1575, again. In 1596, again. 4 bankruptcies in 40 years. Each time, reforms were promised. Each time, the promises were swallowed. They continued borrowing and spending relentlessly. Stop. Doesn't this sound familiar? Stage 4. Loss of productive capacity. Here is what most people fail to understand about Spain's collapse. They had all the gold and silver, and that became their end. Because when you have endless money, you stop producing. Why grow food when you can import it? Why build ships when you have purchasing power? Why innovate when you can simply spend? The Spanish elites considered work beneath their dignity. Production declined. Agriculture stagnated. All the wealth flowing from the Americas was sent back out to pay for goods imported from other countries. Spain was essentially taking with one hand and giving away with the other. Stage 5. Social collapse. The streets of Madrid were no longer safe and began to fill with beggars. Crime rates exploded. It became impossible to stop brain drain, and productive citizens, the best minds, those building, creating, striving to grow, fled to countries like France, England, and the Netherlands. All that remained were bureaucrats, soldiers, and clergy. no one was left who created value or generated wealth. Stage 6. Total collapse. In 1640, Spain lost Portugal. In 1650, the Netherlands. By 1700, the Spanish Empire appeared large on the surface, but was economically dead. In less than a century, they fell from world superpower to second-rate power, and they never truly recovered. Today, Spain continues as a regional European country. The descendants of the conquistadors now possess a tourism paradise, a pleasant, cultured, developed nation, but no longer a decisive force in terms of global power. Now let's move forward 300 years. Britain. The 1900s. The magnificent empire on which the sun never set. At its peak, Britain ruled nearly 25% of the world's land surface, 26 million square kilometers. It had 400 million people. The pound sterling was the global reserve currency. Every major trade agreement was conducted in sterling. Every central bank invested in British bonds. London was a financial center. The heart of the world seemed to beat there. And just like Spain 300 years earlier, they believed it was permanent. But the pattern had already begun. Stage 1. Military overextension. By 1900, Britain had military deployments on every continent: India, Africa, the Middle East, China, the Pacific, the Caribbean. They had to defend territories across 6 continents. In 1914, World War I began. Britain faced a choice. They could remain silent and watch Europe destroy itself, or they could enter the war and risk bankrupting the empire. Of course, they chose to fight, because a superpower never loses. They won the war. They preserved the empire. They thought they could recover. They were wrong. World War I cost Britain more than $40 billion, approximately $1 trillion in today's money. They had to borrow from everyone, especially large amounts from America. By 1918, Britain had become a second-rate empire, owing billions of dollars to the United States. Stage 2. Currency devaluation. The pound was supposed to be equivalent to gold, but the war had depleted Britain's gold reserves. All the gold had been sent to America for weapons, food, and supplies. By 1920, Britain's gold reserves had fallen to half of their 1914 level. Yet they still made intense efforts to maintain the value of the pound. In 1925, they returned to the gold standard based on the pre-war exchange rate. The problem was this: the pound was now overvalued. British exports became too expensive. Production began to decline, and inflation started to rise. Unemployment increased. The government had to implement high interest rate policies to defend the currency. This devastated the domestic economy. By 1931, they could no longer endure it. Britain abandoned the gold standard. The pound lost 25% of its value overnight. The global reserve currency had officially admitted it could no longer keep its promises. Stage 3. Debt trap. Before Britain had recovered from its World War I debts, World War II began. This caused them to borrow another $120 billion. More debt from America. By 1945, Britain owed the United States and Canada more than its total national income. The war had been won, but the empire was gone. Stage 4. Loss of productive capacity. In 1947, Britain withdrew from India. The crown jewel that had generated wealth for 200 years was gone. Within the next 20 years, they lost everything. Africa, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, the Caribbean. Each loss meant halted production and accelerated decline. By 1970, the British Empire existed only in history books. Stage 5. Total collapse. Britain survived the war, but its wealth, prestige, and authority had significantly diminished. This also eliminated Britain's former balance of security, both domestically and internationally. When Britain finally entered the European Union in 1973, the imperial age had ended. However, as a legacy of its imperial past, it experienced a large wave of immigration. Britain tried to maintain appearances: permanent membership in the UN Security Council, nuclear weapons, a special relationship with America. But everyone knew the truth. The empire was already gone, and it never returned. Now let us come to the example closest to our time: the Soviet Union, 1945 to 1991. After World War II, the USSR emerged as a superpower: nuclear weapons, a massive army, dominance over Eastern Europe, countless satellites in space. And they believed the future belonged to them. Communism would defeat capitalism. The Soviet model would stand alone in ruling the world. For 45 years, they competed with America. Militarily, they were nearly at the same level. It was like a military arms race. They built more soldiers, more tanks, more missiles. But deep down, the economy was quietly dying. Stage 1. Military overextension. The Soviet Union allocated 20% of its GDP to military spending. This amount was 3 times what America spent, but their economy was only a small fraction of America's. They were in Afghanistan. They supported Cuba. They protected Syria, Vietnam, North Korea, Angola, Ethiopia. Everywhere under America's pressure, they had to present themselves as a counterforce. They acted with the mindset: the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Military costs had become unsustainable. Stage 2. Currency devaluation. The ruble was never a reserve currency. It was worthless internationally. Even Soviet citizens did not trust it. If they could, they used dollars. Knowing this, the government had to buy foreign goods with gold and oil. Therefore, we can say that the Soviet Union's real currency was gold and oil. By 1985, oil prices began to fall due to oversupply, and Soviet gold reserves rapidly dwindled. Real money was running out. Stage 3. Debt trap. In 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. Eastern Europe separated. Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Romania, East Germany. Gone in 1 year. The Soviet government could not stop this because external borrowing had skyrocketed, and they went bankrupt. Stage 4. Loss of production capacity. The Soviet economy stopped growing in the 1970s. Oil revenues kept them afloat, but nothing else worked. Factories could not produce sufficiently or with quality. Farms were inadequate. Technology was decades behind. By the 1980s, the Soviet Union began importing grain. A country with some of the best agricultural lands in the world could not feed itself because there was no central planning. Innovation and production completely stopped. Without incentives, no one produces anything. Stage 5. Total collapse. On December 26, 1991, the Soviet Union officially ended. No war, no invasion, just economic collapse. A superpower with 30,000 nuclear weapons was destroyed by internal economic collapse. The pattern revealed itself once again. Military overextension, currency failure, debt, loss of production, collapse. And now we come to the part that will make you lose sleep. The United States is following the same pattern, step by step, decision by decision. Stage 1. Military overextension. Completed. The United States has over 750 military bases in 80 countries. Troops are deployed in 150 countries. Through NATO, European defense is committed. They have pledged to defend Japan, South Korea, the Philippines. They are at war in the Middle East, countering China, countering Russia. Annual military budget, $850 billion. And it is not enough. If China invades Taiwan, if Russia enters NATO territory, if Iran closes the Persian Gulf, it is never possible to respond to all simultaneously. Military overextension. Just like Spain, just like Britain, just like the USSR. Stage 1 completed. Stage 2, currency devaluation. Completed. In 1971, Nixon closed the gold exchange window of the dollar. The dollar became completely fiat. Convertibility to gold ended. Since 2000, the money supply has increased by 400%. Since 2020, over $6 trillion have been printed. The dollar has lost 90% of its purchasing power since 1971. No copper is mixed into silver coins. Just unlimited paper is printed. Mechanism different. Outcome same. Stage 2 completed. Stage 3. Debt trap. Completed. The United States has $36 trillion of debt. This debt equals 120% of GDP. Interest payments alone approach $1 trillion annually. More is spent on interest than defense. Every year, a current account deficit occurs. In a growing economy, in peacetime, in 2024, this amount will be $1.5 trillion. New debt is taken to pay the interest of old debt. Spain went bankrupt 4 times. Britain borrowed until collapse. USSR ran out of money. The US is on the same path to complete the stages. Stage 3 completed. Stage 4. Loss of production capacity. Completed. The US no longer produces much. It designs, finances, consumes, but it does not produce. The production base has weakened, lost to China, Mexico, Vietnam. Every year, imports exceed exports by billions of dollars. Dependency on foreign supply chains has increased. Medicine, electronics, even military components. Just like Spain became dependent on imports despite silver abundance, the US has become dependent while dollars flow like water. And just like Spain, when money stops flowing, the US will face serious trouble. Stage 4 completed. Stage 5. Social collapse. Completed. Trust in institutions is at historic lows. Crime is rising. Homelessness is exploding. Every year, 100,000 Americans die from drug use. The best minds are leaving or withdrawing. Fertility rates are collapsing. Political dysfunction is everywhere. We cannot agree on anything. Cannot fix anything. Cannot build anything. Signs of collapse are everywhere, but everyone acts as if all is well. It is not. Stage 5 completed. The Soviet Union experienced full collapse at Stage 5 without completing all 7 stages. Britain too. Spain lasted longer, but the pattern was the same. The US is not yet at the end of these stages. But rest assured, it is within this sequence. Stage 6, loss of world reserve currency status. This stage, a direct and painful consequence of currency devaluation in Stage 2, begins as strong world powers start seeking a new, safer haven. Even allies began searching for alternatives. Trade shifted to other currencies, and dollars started returning home because no one was forced to hold them. BRICS countries developed alternatives. Central banks turned to gold purchases. China and Russia trade in yuan and ruble. Saudi Arabia began accepting yuan for oil. Now, large cracks became visible. Stage 7. Full collapse. The disappearance of the Soviet superpower happened in 900 days. The British Empire vanished in 20 years. Spain held on a bit longer, but the result was the same. When reserve currency fails, debt becomes impossible, the army cannot be funded, collapse is inevitable. Collapse is rapid, brutal and ruthless. And every power, every empire that never considered losing faces the same harsh lesson. This can happen, and it is happening. This pattern was observed in 3 empires: Spain, Britain, the Soviet Union. Each believed they were the sole ruler. Each believed they were different. Each believed the rules did not apply to them. Every time, they were wrong. We can hear the same whispers today. We are different. We have technology. We have the dollar. We are America. But the pattern does not care about exceptions. Pattern is mathematical. Pattern is historical. You cannot spend beyond your income forever. You cannot sustain an empire without production capacity. You cannot escape consequences while devaluing your currency. Even if you complete stages 1 to 5, stages 6 and 7 cannot be avoided. The only question is when the next stage will come. Maybe 10 years. Maybe 5. Maybe less. But the pattern signals that collapse is approaching. And when the time comes, it will not be slow, very fast and painful. A currency crisis triggers a debt crisis. A debt crisis triggers a political crisis. Overnight, a superpower becomes a cautionary tale. The reserve currency turns into a regional currency. The empire becomes just a memory. Since 2020, Every stage has been accelerated by the US. More money printed, more debt taken, military commitments overextended, domestic production hollowed out, society on the brink of fragmentation. Perhaps there is a way out. Perhaps America can succeed where Spain, Britain, and the Soviet Union failed. Perhaps reforms will come, reconstructions will begin. Perhaps it can rapidly renew itself. Perhaps this time is truly different. But the pattern hits like a cold wind in the face and says otherwise. Reality says otherwise. And history, which has watched empires disappear in the same way for 500 years, says otherwise. The lesson is about to be learned the hard way. If this made you look again at what you see with your own eyes, subscribe. When stages 6 and 7 unfold, you will want to understand what happens and why. The answers are not in the future, they are hidden in the past. And I can show you again where to look.